Pack your bags, Dad. You have until Sunday. You're no longer welcome in this house. My son, David, didn't even look me in the eyes when he said it. He was looking at his phone, scrolling through some real estate app. I was 63 years old, holding a half-empty mug of coffee in the kitchen I had painted with my own hands, listening to my only child evict me. Before you hear the rest of my confession, please take a brief second to subscribe to the channel. It helps ensure these real-life stories continue to be told. "David, what are you talking about?" I whispered. My hands started shaking. "This is my home. Your mother and I—" "Mom is gone, Dad," he interrupted, finally looking up. His eyes were cold, unfamiliar. "And Chloe and I need space. The baby is coming in 3 months. We need the master bedroom, and we need this house to ourselves. You're becoming a burden." Every single word felt like a physical blow to my chest. I looked at the kitchen table, where a silver-framed photograph of my late wife Martha smiled back at us. We had raised David in this neighborhood. We had paid for his college, his wedding, his business debts. "A burden?" I asked, my voice cracking. "David, I pay for the groceries. I take care of the yard. Where am I supposed to go on my retirement income?" "There's a nice senior living complex near downtown," Chloe said as she walked into the kitchen holding a designer clipboard. She didn't look at me either. She was looking at the walls. "We're going to paint this room a soft beige, David. That outdated wallpaper has to go." I stood there, feeling invisible in my own skin. I wanted to scream, to remind them of everything I had sacrificed. Instead, I quietly set my mug down and walked to my small bedroom at the end of the hall. I locked the door, sat on the edge of the mattress, and stared at the floor. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. But amidst the suffocating grief, a strange, quiet realization started to bloom in the back of my mind. David thought he was throwing me out of his house, because 5 years ago, when Martha passed away, I told him I was shifting everything into his name for tax purposes. At least, that's what he thought I did. The next morning, the house was quiet. David and Chloe had gone out for brunch. I walked into the living room and noticed something missing from the mantelpiece. The silver-framed photograph of Martha was gone. My heart skipped a beat. I searched the drawers, the cabinets, the closets. Nothing. Then I went out to the garage to check the trash bins. There it was, tossed into a black garbage bag. The glass shattered, the silver frame bent. Martha's smiling face was stained with coffee grounds. A cold, dark switch flipped inside me. The sadness didn't vanish, but it was suddenly covered by a hard layer of ice. I took the photograph out, carefully wiped the glass shards away, and carried it back to my room. As I placed it on my nightstand, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text message from an unknown number. "Arthur, we need to talk about the property on Elm Street. There's a discrepancy in the title deed. Call me immediately." The text was signed by Marcus Vance, a senior attorney at Vance & Associates. I didn't know any Marcus Vance, and my house wasn't on Elm Street, it was on Oak Avenue. I stared at the message, my mind racing. Was this a mistake, or was there something about this property that I didn't know? I called the number back immediately. "Mr. Pendleton?" A sharp, professional voice answered on the second ring. "Yes, this is Arthur Pendleton. I received your text, but I think you have the wrong person. My house is on Oak Avenue." There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear the sound of papers wrestling, followed by the heavy clack of a computer keyboard. "Mr. Pendleton, I don't have the wrong person," the lawyer said, his tone dropping into something much more serious. "Are you aware that your son, David Pendleton, attempted to take out a second mortgage on the Oak Avenue property 3 days ago?" My breath caught in my throat. "A second mortgage? He can't do that. The house belongs to—" "Wait, why did you mention Elm Street?" "Because, Mr. Pendleton, according to the county records filed 40 years ago by your late father, the Oak Avenue property is legally tied to a commercial trust under the Elm Street Holding Company, a trust that your son has absolutely no access to. In fact, the bank flagged his mortgage application as potential fraud.
They're preparing to notify the authorities. I sat down on the edge of my bed, the room spinning. My father was a quiet, secretive man who ran a small printing business before he passed. He had bought this land in the 1980s. I always assumed it was a standard residential purchase. "What does this mean, Mr. Vance?" I whispered, my hands shaking. "It means, Mr. Pendleton, that your son David Pendleton doesn't own a single brick of that house. And more importantly, someone else has been paying the property taxes from a hidden offshore account for the last 3 years. Someone who isn't you and isn't your son." Before I could ask another question, I heard the front door slam shut. David and Chloe were back. "Dad!" David's voice echoed down the hallway, loud and arrogant. "Get out here! The movers are coming to give an estimate for the furniture." I told the lawyer I would call him back and hung up. I walked out into the living room. 2 men in blue uniforms were standing by the sofa, clipboards in hand. Chloe was pointing at my favorite leather armchair, the one that Martha had bought me for our 25th anniversary. "That can go straight to the dumpster," Chloe said carelessly. "It smells like old people." "Stop," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it had a weight to it that made the 2 movers instantly freeze. "Ha! David, don't make a scene," laughed David, a condescending, ugly sound. "Dad, we told you Sunday is the deadline. We're just getting a head start. You should be packing your clothes, not arguing." "Get these men out of my house, David." I looked directly at him. "Your house?" David stepped closer, his face tightening. "Are you losing your mind? We signed the quitclaim deed 5 years ago after Mom died. You signed it over to me so we wouldn't have to deal with probate. The deed is in my safe upstairs. This house is legally mine. I've been letting you live here out of the goodness of my heart, but now I need you out." The movers looked uncomfortable. One of them cleared his throat. Folks, we can come back another time." "No, stay," David snapped. He turned back to me, his face red. "Dad, if you don't start packing, I will literally throw your things onto the lawn myself. Don't force me to call the police on my own father." I looked at my son, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the man whose tears I had wiped when he failed his first business venture. I realized right then that the son I loved no longer existed. In his place was a greedy, entitled stranger. "Call them," I said quietly. David blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "Call the police, David. Let's see what happens." Chloe stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "David, just call them. He's trespassing at this point. We have the paperwork." David pulled out his phone, his hand trembling slightly with anger, and dialed the non-emergency police line. Within 15 minutes, a patrol car pulled up into the driveway. 2 officers, a man and a woman, walked up the steps. "Is there a problem here, sir?" the officer asked, looking between David and me. "Yes, officer," David said, his voice dripping with false victimhood. "This is my property. I am the sole owner. My father here is refusing to leave the premises after being given proper notice. I need him removed." The female officer turned to me. "Sir, is this true? Do you have a lease or any legal right to be here?" I didn't answer right away. I walked over to the kitchen counter, picked up a pen, and wrote down the phone number from Marcus Vance, the lawyer who had called me just an hour ago. I handed it to the officer. "Please call this number," I said calmly. "Ask for Marcus Vance. Give me my name and this address. He has the official county title records." David scoffed. "Dad, stop embarrassing yourself. Your little bluff isn't going to work." The female officer stepped outside to make the call. The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. David stood with his arms crossed, a smug smirk on his face. Chloe was smirking too, looking at her nails. The 2 movers stood awkwardly by the door, wishing they were anywhere else. 5 minutes passed, then 10. When the female officer walked back into the house, her smirk on her face was completely gone. She looked at David, then at me, her expression a mix of shock and intense professional seriousness. "Mr. David Pendleton?" she asked. "Yes," David said, squaring his shoulders. "Are you going to escort him out now?" "Sir, I need you to step away from the kitchen counter and put your hands behind your back." She pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from her belt. David's jaw dropped. "What? Are you crazy? I'm the homeowner. He's the one who's trespassing." "According to the state attorney's office and the county registrar, you do not own this home. And furthermore, the quitclaim deed you filed 5 years ago is currently flagged as a fraudulent document. The notary public signature on it belongs to a woman who passed away 6 years ago. You forged a deceased woman's signature to transfer this property into your name." The room felt like it ran out of oxygen. Chloe gasped, dropping her clipboard. The sound of it hitting the hardwood floor was like a gunshot. That's impossible," David stammered, his face turning ghostly white. "My dad signed it. He gave it to me." "I never signed anything."
"David," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was bleeding inside. 5 years ago, you brought me a stack of papers after your mother's funeral. You told me they were insurance documents. I trusted you. I didn't read them. But it seems you didn't just lie to me. You lied to the state." The male officer grabbed David's arms and pulled them behind his back, clicking the handcuffs into place. David began to panic, looking around the room like a trapped animal. "Dad, tell them it's a mistake," he yelled, his voice cracking, losing all of its previous arrogance. "Chloe, do something!" Chloe was backed against the wall, her face pale, completely ignoring her husband. She was looking at me with absolute terror. As the officers began leading David toward the door, the male officer stopped and looked at me. "Mr. Pendleton, the attorney, Mr. Vance, is on his way here right now with the legal executors of the estate. He requested that you stay put. There is a secondary issue regarding this property that needs your immediate attention." "What secondary issue?" I asked. "He said it involves your late wife, Martha." The officers walked David out. I watched through the front window as they put him into the back of the police cruiser. Chloe rushed out after them, screaming into her phone, completely ignoring the fact that she had just left her belongings inside. The two movers quietly slipped out the back door without saying a word. I was alone in the house. The silence was deafening. 10 minutes later, a sleek black sedan pulled into the driveway. A man in a sharp gray suit got out carrying a thick leather briefcase. It was Marcus Vance. But he wasn't alone. An elderly woman got out of the passenger side. When I saw her face, my knees nearly gave out. It was Eleanor, Martha's older sister, whom we hadn't seen or spoken to in over 15 years after a bitter family feud over their parents' inheritance. I opened the front door before they could even knock. "Arthur," Eleanor said, her voice soft, carrying the weight of a decade and a half of silence. She looked older, frailer, but her eyes were exactly like Martha's. "Eleanor, what is going on here?" I asked, stepping aside to let them in. We sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where, just an hour ago, my son had told me I was a burden. Marcus Vance opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of yellow documents and a handwritten letter. "Mr. Pendleton," the lawyer began, "as I mentioned on the phone, your father originally bought this land under a commercial trust. But what you didn't know is that 20 years ago, when your father passed, he left the hidden secondary rights of the property to your wife, Martha, not to you. He did this to protect the asset from any potential business liabilities you might face." I stared at him, confused. "Martha knew about this?" "She did," Eleanor interrupted, placing her thin hand over mine. "Martha kept it a secret from you, Arthur, not to hurt you, but to protect you. Martha knew what David was becoming long before you did. She saw his greed. She saw how he manipulated people for money." Eleanor nodded toward the lawyer, who handed me the handwritten letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Martha's elegant cursive script. I opened it, my hands trembling. "My dearest Arthur, if you are reading this, it means I am gone and the worst has likely happened.
I know how much you love our son, and I know your golden heart would give him everything until you have nothing left. That is why I cannot let you do that. David has a darkness in him, Arthur. He owes money to people who are dangerous. He has been trying to find a way to take this house from us for years. I have placed the true title of this house into a joint trust with Eleanor. The property taxes have been paid from an account David doesn't know exists. If David ever tries to force you out, Eleanor has instructions to step in with the real deeds. Forgive me for the secret, my love. I did it to ensure you would always have a roof over your head. Keep your heart safe. With all my love, Martha. A single tear fell from my cheek, smudging the ink on the paper. My wife had seen the storm coming years before it hit. She had protected me from my own son and from my own blind love for him. Marcus Vance explained gently. David came to my office last week. He had discovered a loophole in the fake deed he created and tried to use it to secure a massive loan to clear his business debts. He didn't realize that the moment he triggered that specific financial check, it alerted our trust office. We've been building the fraud case against him for days. Today's confrontation just accelerated everything. What happens now? I asked, looking at Eleanor. The house is yours, Arthur, Eleanor said softly. It's always been yours. David will face criminal charges for forgery and grand theft. Chloe's family has already hired a lawyer to file for divorce, from what I've heard this afternoon. They want nothing to do with his legal mess. She paused, looking around the kitchen. The question is, what do you want to do? I looked at the kitchen walls. I looked at the shattered frame of Martha's photograph sitting on the counter. I thought about the decades of memories, the laughter, the holidays, and the sudden brutal betrayal that had shattered it all in a single morning. 6 months later, the winter snow was beginning to melt outside. I sat in my new living room. It wasn't the house on Oak Avenue. I had sold that property to a young family who wanted to raise their children there. The money from the sale was more than enough to buy a small, beautiful cottage by the lake, with leftover to live comfortably for the rest of my days. David had pled guilty to felony fraud and is currently serving a 3-year sentence in a state facility. I hadn't gone to see him, not out of anger or out of a desire for revenge, but because I finally realized that sometimes the greatest act of love you can show someone who is destroying themselves is to let them face the consequences of their actions. Chloe had given birth to a little girl. She sent me a photograph in the mail a few weeks ago. On the back, she had written a short note asking me if I wanted to visit my granddaughter. I haven't answered yet. Maybe someday I will. But for now, I need time. I picked up my coffee mug and walked out onto the back porch, looking out over the calm, still water of the lake. The air was cold, but the sun was warm on my face. On the table next to my chair sat Martha's photograph, now safe in a beautiful new mahogany frame. I looked at her smile, and for the first time in 5 years, I felt a deep, genuine sense of warmth in my chest. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I had finally found my peace.